The morning was quiet in the small suburban neighborhood. The sun was soft, the streets were clean, and everything looked peaceful. Daniel walked slowly on the sidewalk, holding a leash in his hand. At the other end of the leash was Max, a calm brown dog walking close to his side. Max did not pull. He did not bark. He stayed near Daniel, watching him carefully with alert eyes. To anyone watching from far away, Daniel looked like a normal man walking his dog. But inside, Daniel's heart was beating fast. His chest felt tight. His hands were slightly shaking. He tried to breathe slowly, just like his doctor taught him. Max noticed it immediately. The dog moved a little closer, brushing against Daniel's leg. That small touch helped Daniel stay grounded. Daniel had not always been like this. There was a time when he was confident and active. But something bad had happened years ago, something that changed his body and his mind. Since then, fear could come without warning. Loud voices, stress, or sudden confrontation could make him feel dizzy and weak. That was why Max was not just a pet. Max was his lifeline. As they reached a small bench near the community park, Daniel sat down to rest. Max sat beside him, calm and steady. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment and focused on breathing. The neighborhood felt safe. Or at least, it used to. Suddenly, the sound of fast footsteps broke the calm. Daniel opened his eyes. A woman was walking toward him with sharp steps and a stiff posture. She held a folder in her hand. Her lips were pressed tight, and her eyes were fixed on Max. This was Karen. Many neighbors knew her as the most strict person in the HOA. She believed rules were everything. Grass too long, trash cans out too early, cars parked wrong. Nothing escaped her notice. And now, her eyes were locked on Max. "Excuse me," she said loudly, stopping in front of Daniel. "You?" "Yes, you." Daniel felt his stomach drop. His heart began to race again. He looked up slowly. "Yes?" he asked, his voice low and careful. Karen pointed at Max. "That dog is a violation." Daniel blinked. "I'm sorry. Dogs are not allowed in common areas," she said sharply. "And I've seen you here many times. This is against HOA rules." Max stayed still, sensing Daniel's rising stress. He leaned closer, his presence steady. Daniel swallowed. "He is allowed," Daniel said softly. "He's a service dog." Karen let out a short laugh. "Everyone says that," she replied. "I need proof. Until then, this dog is not allowed here." Daniel felt heat rush to his face. People were starting to look. A man walking past slowed down. A woman across the street stopped with her phone in hand. Daniel hated attention. It made everything worse. "He helps me," Daniel said, trying to stay calm. "I need him." Karen crossed her arms. "That's not my problem. Rules are rules." Then she said the words that made Daniel's blood run cold. "If this continues," she said, "the HOA can take action, including removing the dog." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Removing Max? The thought alone made his vision blur. His hands shook harder now. He tried to speak, but the words would not come out. Max stood up and pressed against Daniel's leg, grounding him, doing exactly what he was trained to do. Karen stepped back. "See? Aggressive behavior," she said loudly. "I'll be reporting this." She wrote something on her paper, turned around, and walked away without another word. Daniel sat there, frozen. The quiet neighborhood no longer felt safe. His chest felt heavy. He looked down at Max, who gazed back at him with calm eyes. "They don't understand you," Daniel whispered. "But I do." He didn't know it yet, but that morning was only the beginning. Karen was not done. And soon, this quiet man and his loyal dog would be pushed into a fight he never wanted, but one he would have to face. Daniel did not sleep well that night. The memory of Karen's voice kept repeating in his head. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her pointing at Max, threatening to take him away. His chest felt tight, and his thoughts moved in circles. Max stayed close to the bed, watching Daniel carefully, ready to help if the fear returned. In the morning, Daniel moved slowly through his small house. He made coffee but forgot to drink it. His hands shook as he read the paper notice Karen had dropped off later that day. It was full of rules, warnings, and fine amounts. The words felt cold and heavy. It was clear she was serious. This was no small misunderstanding. Daniel sat on the couch and tried to calm himself. Max rested his head on Daniel's knee, feeling the tension. Daniel placed his hand on Max's fur and breathed slowly. He reminded himself that Max was legally allowed to be with him. Still, fear whispered inside his mind. Karen had power in the neighborhood, and she knew how to use it. Later that day, Daniel forced himself to step outside. Avoiding life only made things worse. He walked with Max toward the mailbox. A few neighbors watched from their windows. Some looked curious. Others looked uncomfortable. No one said anything. As Daniel reached the mailbox, an older neighbor named Mrs. Lee smiled at him. "Good morning," she said gently. "Good morning," Daniel replied, relieved by her calm tone. She glanced at Max. "He's a good dog," she added. "Always so focused." Daniel nodded. "He helps me a lot." Mrs. Lee seemed to understand more than she said. "Some people forget that not all struggles are visible," she said quietly before walking away. Her words stayed with Daniel. The next few days were tense. Karen sent more notices. She took photos from a distance. She spoke loudly about violations during casual conversations with other residents. Daniel felt watched all the time. His anxiety grew. Even simple tasks felt hard. One afternoon, Karen confronted him again near his driveway. This time, she was not alone. 2 HOA board members stood beside her. Their faces were serious but unsure. "This dog continues to break HOA rules," Karen said firmly. "We need compliance." Daniel felt the familiar wave of panic rising. His vision blurred slightly. Max stepped forward, pressing gently against him. "He is a service animal," Daniel said, his voice shaking but clear. "I have the documents." Karen rolled her eyes. "We will review them," she said. "Until then, restrictions apply." That night, Daniel sat at his desk and opened a folder he rarely touched. Inside were medical letters, training certificates, and legal papers. He read them slowly, reminding himself of the truth. Max was protected. He was not breaking the law. He was surviving. Daniel realized something important. Staying silent would only make things worse. Karen was counting on his fear. She expected him to give up. But Max had never given up on him. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He contacted a local advocacy group for people with disabilities. He explained everything in a calm email. He attached copies of his documents. Pressing send felt scary, but also freeing. For the first time since Karen confronted him, Daniel felt a small sense of control return. He looked down at Max and managed a weak smile. "I don't want to fight," he said softly. "But I won't lose you." Max looked back at him, steady and loyal. Daniel did not know how the situation would end. He only knew one thing. He was no longer willing to be quiet. And soon, the HOA would learn that rules without understanding could cause real harm. 2 days later, Daniel received an email from the HOA. It was short, formal, and cold. They scheduled a mandatory community meeting for Friday evening. Attendance was required. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Public meetings were the hardest places for him. Noise, judgment, and pressure could break his focus fast. Still, he knew avoiding it would only make things worse. On Friday, the small community hall filled with residents. Chairs scraped the floor. Voices echoed. Daniel sat near the back, Max resting at his feet. The dog stayed alert, watching Daniel's breathing, sensing the tension growing inside him. Karen stood at the front, beside a table of papers. She looked confident, almost pleased. When the meeting began, she spoke first. She talked about rules, order, and fairness. Then she pointed at Daniel. "This resident," she said, "has ignored repeated warnings." Daniel felt every eye turn toward him. His heart pounded. His throat tightened. Max pressed gently against his leg, steadying him. Karen continued, claiming the dog caused disturbances, safety concerns, and rule violations. Her voice was loud, sharp, certain. One board member, a man with gray hair, raised a hand. "Do we have confirmation this is not a service animal?" he asked. Karen hesitated for a second. "He claims it is," she said. "But claims are not proof." Daniel stood slowly. His legs felt weak, but he stayed upright. "I have proof," he said quietly. The room grew still. "I live with a medical condition. Max is trained to help me when I am not safe on my own." Karen sighed loudly. "This is not the place for personal stories," she replied. The gray-haired man leaned forward. "Actually," he said, "it is. Because the law protects service animals." He looked at Daniel. "Do you have documentation?" Daniel nodded and handed over the folder he carried. His hands shook, but he did not drop it. The board members read silently. Papers passed from hand to hand. Karen's smile faded. She crossed her arms. "Even so," she said, "his dog makes people uncomfortable." A woman in the crowd stood up. "My son has a service dog," she said. "It saved his life." Murmurs spread through the room. Another neighbor spoke. We've never had trouble with Max. Heads nodded. The room shifted. Daniel felt it. The board chair cleared his throat. We will pause any enforcement actions, he said, until we review this fully. Karen's face tightened. That is unacceptable, she snapped. What is unacceptable, the chair replied, is ignoring the law. The meeting ended quietly. People avoided Karen's eyes. Daniel remained seated, shaking, but breathing. Max stayed close, calm as ever. Outside, the night air felt cool. Daniel realized something had changed. The fight was no longer hidden. Karen had pushed too far, and now others were watching. This was not over, but for the first time, Daniel felt seen, heard, and supported. He walked home slowly, Max beside him. The fear was still there, but so was strength. A quiet strength he never knew he had. And soon, the neighborhood would learn a lesson about compassion, dignity, and respect. That night, Daniel slept deeper than before. Max lay near the bed, listening to every sound. Outside, porch lights glowed, and the neighborhood felt quieter. The next days would bring tension, questions, and pressure. Karen would not let go easily. But the silence after the meeting felt different. It carried awareness. It carried witnesses. Daniel knew challenges remained. He still feared confrontation. He still disliked crowds. Yet something steady had formed inside him. Standing up once had shown him he could survive it. Max lifted his head, watching Daniel carefully. Their bond felt stronger, tested, and proven. Somewhere across the street, Karen watched from her window. Her certainty had cracked. The rules she loved were no longer simple weapons. And soon, consequences would follow choices. Daniel did not see her, but the shift had already begun. What started as fear was turning into resolve. The real test was coming, and this time, Daniel would not stand alone, because truth had finally stepped into the light. And when truth stands, intimidation fades, power shifts, and justice finds its voice in quiet courage rising. The next week felt heavy and slow for Daniel. Every morning, he woke up with a tight chest, waiting for another message from the HOA. Max stayed close, following him from room to room. The dog sensed the pressure building again. Daniel tried to keep his routine normal, but fear sat quietly in the background, refusing to leave. On Tuesday afternoon, a certified letter arrived. Daniel's hands shook as he opened it. The HOA demanded a formal compliance hearing. They listed possible penalties, fines, and animal removal procedures. Reading those words made Daniel feel dizzy. Max pressed against his leg, steady and calm. Daniel sat down and focused on breathing. Instead of panicking, Daniel remembered the advocacy group he contacted. He called them immediately. A calm woman listened carefully as he explained everything. She reassured him that the law was clear. Service animals were protected. The HOA had no legal right to remove Max. Her steady voice helped Daniel feel less alone. That evening, Daniel organized his documents again. Medical letters, training records, legal protections. This time, he read them not with fear, but with understanding. These papers were not excuses. They were proof of survival. Max was not a privilege. Max was a necessity. Meanwhile, Karen was busy. She knocked on doors, telling neighbors her version of the story. She claimed Daniel was lying. She warned that rules were being ignored. Some neighbors listened quietly. Others felt uncomfortable. Her tone felt less confident than before, more defensive. On the day of the hearing, the room was fuller than expected. A representative from the advocacy group sat beside Daniel. Their presence alone changed the mood. Karen looked surprised, then irritated. The HOA board members exchanged nervous glances. Karen spoke first, repeating the same arguments. Rules. Order. Appearance. She avoided eye contact with Daniel. When it was Daniel's turn, he stood slowly. His voice was calm, not loud. He explained his condition. He explained Max's role. He explained what would happen without him. Then the advocate spoke. She explained the law clearly and firmly. She cited protections. She explained consequences for discrimination. The room was silent. The board members listened closely, taking notes. Karen interrupted, raising her voice. This is about control, she snapped. Not emotions. The board chair responded calmly. This is about legality and human dignity. After a short break, the decision was announced. All actions against Daniel were dropped. The HOA issued a formal apology. New training on disability awareness would be required for board members. Karen stared at the table. Her authority was gone. Outside, Daniel felt the weight lift from his chest. He breathed deeply. Max wagged his tail softly, sensing relief. Neighbors approached Daniel, offering quiet apologies and kind words. Mrs. Lee smiled warmly. As Daniel walked home, he realized something important. Standing up did not make him weak. It made him visible. And visibility had power. Max walked proudly beside him, not as a problem, but as a protector. That night, Daniel sat peacefully on his porch. The neighborhood was still the same, but it felt different. Fear no longer owned the space. Respect had finally arrived. Inside, Karen sat alone, staring at the rules she once hid behind. They no longer protected her. The lesson had been written clearly. Compassion mattered. And courage, even quiet courage, could change everything. Life slowly returned to a steady rhythm after the hearing, but the tension did not disappear overnight. Daniel noticed small changes first. The neighborhood felt quieter, not because people were absent, but because the sharp judgment in the air was gone. When Daniel walked with Max, fewer eyes followed him. Some neighbors even nodded or smiled, unsure at first, but trying. Daniel still felt nervous stepping outside. Fear does not leave all at once. It fades in pieces. Each walk was a test. Each breath was a choice to move forward. Max stayed close, walking calmly, reminding Daniel that he was safe. One afternoon, Daniel received an email from the HOA. This time, the tone was different. It was respectful and careful. They confirmed in writing that Max was recognized as a protected service animal. They apologized again and promised that no future action would be taken against Daniel or his dog. Reading the message, Daniel felt a quiet release inside his chest. Words on a screen had power. They meant safety. Karen, however, had changed. She no longer walked the neighborhood with confidence. She avoided meetings. When she passed Daniel one morning, she looked away. The woman who once used rules as weapons now carried silence instead. People noticed. Authority without fairness had no support left. At the next community gathering, something unexpected happened. The HOA chair announced new guidelines. Disability awareness training would be mandatory. Service animals would be clearly protected in all community areas. The announcement was met with light applause. Daniel stayed seated, Max resting by his side. He did not need attention. Knowing others would not face the same fear was enough. After the meeting, a young man approached Daniel. His voice was soft. "I have anxiety too," he said. "Seeing you stand up helped me." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He nodded, unsure what to say. Max looked up, tail wagging slowly, sensing the moment. That evening, Daniel sat on his porch watching the sky change colors. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders felt relaxed. Max lay beside him, breathing steadily. The world felt calm again, not perfect, but manageable. Daniel thought about how close he had come to losing everything that kept him stable. Fear had almost convinced him to stay quiet. But silence would have cost him his freedom. Standing up had been painful, frightening, and exhausting. Yet it had opened a door he did not know existed. Karen's story spread quietly through the neighborhood, not as gossip, but as a reminder. Power without empathy could harm real lives. Rules without understanding could destroy trust. People began to look at one another differently. Not every struggle could be seen. Not every need could be explained at first glance. Weeks passed. Daniel's routine felt normal again. Morning walks. Afternoon rest. Simple meals. Calm nights. Max continued his work, alert and loyal. Their bond felt stronger than ever, shaped by pressure and protected by truth. One day, Daniel received a letter from the advocacy group. They thanked him for speaking up. His case had helped educate others. Daniel smiled softly. He never wanted to be an example. He only wanted to live in peace. Sometimes, peace required courage. As the sun set, Daniel whispered to Max, "We did it." Max looked back with steady eyes, as if to say, "We always will." The neighborhood did not change because of rules. It changed because one quiet man refused to give up what kept him alive. And because of that choice, kindness found its place again, stronger than fear, louder than control, and lasting longer than any rule ever could. Months later, the neighborhood felt settled again. Daniel no longer woke with fear gripping his chest. He still had difficult days, but they passed more gently. Max continued to work quietly, watching, guiding, steady as ever. Together they rebuilt trust with the world, one slow walk at a time. Daniel began volunteering with the advocacy group that helped him. He answered emails, shared his story, and listened to others who felt small and scared. He never spoke loudly. He never blamed anyone. He simply explained what life was like when understanding was missing. People listened because his honesty was calm and real. One Saturday morning, the HOA hosted a community breakfast. It was meant to bring neighbors together. Daniel hesitated before going. Crowd still made him nervous. Max nudged his hand, a silent reminder. Daniel took a breath and went. At the event, people greeted him warmly. Children asked to pet Max, and Daniel explained politely when it was not the right moment. Parents nodded with respect. The mood felt lighter than it ever had. Even the air seemed kinder. Karen did not attend. Her absence felt final, not dramatic. Over time, she stepped down from the board. No announcement was made. The neighborhood moved forward without her rule's first voice. Order remained, but compassion led. Later that day, Daniel sat under a tree with Max resting nearby. He watched neighbors laugh and talk. He realized something important. He did not need to prove anything anymore. His life did not require permission. The law had protected him, but courage had carried him through. A new neighbor approached, pushing a stroller. She smiled and said, "Thank you for speaking up. My brother uses a service dog too." Daniel felt warmth spread through him. One story had reached another life. As seasons changed, Daniel felt stronger. Not because fear disappeared, but because he knew how to face it. He trusted himself now. He trusted Max. Together they had survived pressure, judgment, and threat. Together they had one peace. On a quiet evening, Daniel walked the familiar path near the park. The same bench waited there. He sat, breathing slowly. Max sat beside him, calm and alert. The memory of that first confrontation felt distant, like a storm remembered after clear skies return. Daniel looked around and smiled softly. The neighborhood was still ordinary. That was the gift. Safety had returned. Respect had taken root. The rules now served people, not the other way around. Before heading home, Daniel whispered a promise to himself. He would never stay silent when kindness was needed. He would protect others the way Max protected him. Quiet courage, he learned, could change many lives. As the sun dipped below the houses, Daniel stood and walked home. Max walked proudly at his side. Their shadows stretched long on the sidewalk, steady and unbroken, a simple picture of dignity, loyalty, and hope, moving forward together into a peaceful future. He also learned to forgive himself for the fear he carried. Fear was not weakness, it was a signal to care. Daniel practiced patience, drank water, rested often, and accepted help without shame. Small habits rebuilt his confidence day by day. When stress returned, Max guided him through it, steady and present. The neighborhood benefited too. Signs appeared explaining service animals. Meetings began with reminders about respect. Complaints were handled with listening first. People changed because someone spoke calmly and stayed firm. On the anniversary of the hearing, Daniel wrote a short note to the board. He thanked them for learning and choosing fairness. He did not mention Karen. The past no longer needed names. That night, Daniel watched stars appear. He felt grateful for quiet victories that rarely make noise. He knew challenges would come again somewhere else. When they did, he would be ready. Courage had become a skill, practiced and reliable. Max lifted his head and sighed, content. Daniel smiled, feeling peace settle gently, knowing tomorrow would be ordinary, and that was more than enough. He walked inside quietly, locked the door, fed Max dinner, and rested, confident that fairness could grow anywhere people chose empathy over fear, again and again. Tomorrow promised calm steps, open skies, hope,